When that country music hits, you know it's time for an hour of sports talk radio here on 95.3 WCHE. This is Locker Room Buzz, and I am CJ Tully, and we have lots of sports talk to get into today. The Philadelphia Phillies might still have their answer on the market. We'll talk about that in free agency. And can they compare to the Mets? Anybody they add, will that ever compare to what the Mets have done this offseason to compete in the NL East? Also, what is happening to the Pro Bowl? We're going to have that this weekend. I'll break down kind of the decline of what we've seen with the NFL and this Pro Bowl, and just all-star games in general, how they rank in my opinion. We also have lots to get to in the NFL with championship weekend, and now the Super Bowl has been defined and the coaching carousel continues. Have some breaking news that actually just came out before I got on air with something else happening with the coaching carousel, so I'll get into that. And then college football talk. You know, we always have some college football to talk about here on this program. We'll get into the changes that they've made with the playoffs, as well as some early college football top 10 predictions in my opinion. But as always, we'll start off here with some baseball talk. And I still think that some of the biggest names available could suit the Philadelphia Phillies in this offseason. So we've seen them make a few moves. I've talked about it in the weeks past. We saw what they did. They brought in Adolis Garcia. They bring in some bullpen help. But compared to what they've lost, they haven't really gained too much to fill in some of the missing pieces. You saw what they did. They lost Ranger Suarez. We did re-sign Kyle Schwarber. We re-signed JT Realmuto, but nothing new has been added to this team as a spark plug. And then news came out the other day that Harrison Bader will not be re-signing with the Phillies. He signs a 2-year, $20 million deal with the San Francisco Giants, which comes to a shock to a lot of people. It seemed like it even came to a shock to Harrison Bader that he wasn't back here on the Phillies. It seemed like he was fine with coming back. He was kind of motivated to come back. But the Phillies just did not make the same offer, I would assume. Nothing has come out on that end of things as to whether or not the Phillies pitched an offer or if they just gave up on Harrison Bader as a whole. We do know that Justin Crawford's going to be coming up, and the more and more it seems like he's going to be the everyday center fielder for this team, just given the fact that we haven't found anybody to replace that. You do have Brandon Marsh, but he's obviously going to have to be a starter as well, and then you're going to have Adolis Garcia. So it seems like that's going to be your outfield. It doesn't seem like they really have any juice to bring anybody else in, but they were all in on Bo Bichette before he ended up signing with the New York Mets. So with looking at some of these names that are still out there, some of these players could still be involved in talks with the Philadelphia Phillies. Now, none of these necessarily have a correlation to the Phillies right now. No reports have been broken, but I went through and looked at some of the biggest names still remaining in free agency. And when you look at some of these, they fill exactly what the Phillies need. So starting off here, Framber Valdez, still the biggest arm left in free agency. He was 13-11 last year, certainly not his best year. He had a 3.66 ERA in 31 games pitched, but you can't expect Framber Valdez to play that bad another year. He's been a great pitcher for the Astros. Now a free agent. I'm still surprised he's on the market. I would say beyond Freddie Peralta, he was the best free agent still remaining here. So now Framber Valdez is on the market. Or no, Freddie Peralta was a trade, but you look at here, Framber Valdez, I think he would fit in perfectly to fill in for what you lost with Ranger Suarez. Again, looking at this rotation, they lose Ranger Suarez, but who did they bring in to replace him? Andrew Painter is seemingly the only guy that's going to be able to do so. But as I've made it very clear on this program, I am not high on Andrew Painter. I don't believe he's somebody you could put all the eggs in the basket with. And then you look at Zach Wheeler. We're still unsure of what his health is going to be. Aaron Nola, he's going to be playing for Team Italy because all he does is throw meatballs. So we'll see what he's able to do here coming into this season. But again, somebody I'm not necessarily relying on to come in here and just get back to his old ways. You're going to have Ranger Suarez, or not Ranger Suarez. You're going to have Jesus Luzardo. He's somebody you were able to rely on last year. So we'll see what happens with that. Christopher Sanchez is another one. I've kept wanting to say Sir Anthony Dominguez. So he's somebody else you can rely on. But again, I think Framber Valdez would fit this rotation perfectly, and he could slot in there to where you would have seen Ranger Suarez. Some other big names on the pitching market. You're going to have Zach Gallen. He was 13-15 last year, a fall-off season for him as well, but somebody I think can get going on the right team and with the right place in a rotation. None of these guys are going to come in here and need to be the number one or number two in the rotation. This would be a lot of back-end help, and I think that's where some of these veteran pitchers could show a big addition here to this Phillies rotation. Chris Bassett, another one. He was 11-9. Lucas Giolito, he was 10-4 last year with a 3.41 ERA. That was for the Red Sox. I wouldn't hate bringing in Giolito here. Justin Verlander and Max Scherzer are also both on the market. Max Scherzer 5-5 last year with a 5.19 ERA. He was not really added to the Blue Jays to play all too much. He didn't do so for them. Justin Verlander had probably his worst year of his career, 4-11 with a 3.85 ERA. I know it took him a long time to even get his first win, so not necessarily wanting to bring in Justin Verlander, but again, some of these names, Framber Valdez, Zach Gallen, Chris Bassett, Lucas Giolito, Justin Verlander, and Max Sanchez. or Max Scherzer. Some of these guys could come in here and, again, be that end of the rotation kind of guy. You're not counting on them to go out there and give you everything. They don't need to come in here and be the day one starter. These guys are going to be in the back of the rotation, and I think that's where some veteran help could help this team, and it could bring a new little spark plug into this rotation. Now, coming to this lineup, as I said before, they were in on Bo Bichette, so they were open to moving some pieces around on the infield. And you look at some of these guys still available, I'm pretty shocked that some of them are still available, and I think they would be a great fit on this infield for the Phillies to bring another bat into this lineup and to even bring a little bit of defense in some of these players' cases. Starting off here, Austin Hayes. Now, again, if you're a Phillies fan, you've been for a while. We did have Austin Hayes a few years ago, and he was not exactly what this Phillies team needed. We kind of ran him out of town. But he had a big resurgence here last year with the Reds, hitting 15 home runs. He hit 266 with 64 RBIs. Kind of started to fall off at the end of the season, but he had a great summer. And again, he's somebody that could maybe slot in here and be an outfielder for this team. Again, we do have a overabundance of lackluster outfielders, so I don't know if he's necessarily the perfect fit here, but without bringing Harrison Bader back, maybe he's somebody who could come in here and be a different player than he was his first time around. Again, not my first choice, but somebody to look at. Also is an outfield/DH kind of position here. Marcell Ozuna, 21 home runs last year with a 232 batting average with 68 RBIs. Still unsure of where he would fit on this team unless you want to move Kyle Schwarber to the outfield and you'd have Ozuna at DH. But then again, you paid Kyle Schwarber all that money. I would feel like it'd be Ozuna out there in the outfield. Can that work for this Phillies team? Maybe. Again, he's not going to be the best defensive. Maybe that's where you keep somebody like a Crawford or a Marsh off the bench. They come in for a defensive replacement, but you add the bat of Marcell Ozuna to this lineup, and I think that'd be great for this team. Now, I was at the playoff game against the Braves a few years ago at home when, everyone's chanting DUI, so I don't know if he necessarily would want to come to play for the Phillies, but I'm sure for the right price, you would kind of suck up anything that anybody would chant at you. So Marcell Ozuna could be a possible fit here for the Phillies. Now, two players on the infield that fit this team perfectly if you look at everything they've been able to do. Hey, we'll start off here with somebody they were going to bring in last trade deadline. That's Eugenio Suarez. Last year, 49 home runs, a 228 batting average with 118 RBIs. Now, I am somebody who's looking for a guy to get on base here, somebody to be a consistent bat in this lineup, and you're not going to get that with Eugenio Suarez, but you're going to get some pop, and maybe that's what this team needs. They need a strong right-handed bat. Yes, Adolis Garcia is supposed to be that, but we're not sure what we're going to get with him. His career has kind of started to fall off in the past few years, so maybe you bring Eugenio in here. He goes to third base. You could trade out Alec Bohm. Maybe you add some bullpen or starting pitching help with that trade. I think that's somewhere that the Phillies could look was with Eugenio Suarez. Again, 49 home runs for him. You pair that up with what Kyle Schwarber was able to do last year, and this team would have been able to hit themselves out of any slump. Somebody would have to be getting hot at some point. You would have Eugenio Suarez in there with Schwarber, with Harper, with Turner. That's a solid top of the lineup that has to get going at some point, even if they are in a slump. Somebody in there has to be hitting for power at some given point. So Eugenio Suarez, he's a possibility. Finally, I think the best fit here for the Phillies, and the guy I'm most shocked that is still a free agent, would be Luis Arias. This guy is a batting average machine. He knows how to get on base. He's a solid fielder. He had 8 home runs last year with a 292 batting average, 61 RBIs with 11 stolen bases. Again, Arias isn't going to beat you with his bat necessarily with power, but can you imagine if Luis Arias is leading off for this Phillies team? He gets on base constantly. He has the ability to steal bases. You have Harper backing him up. You'd have Schwarber. It's just that consistent bat. That's exactly what Bryson Stott was supposed to be for this Phillies team. He hasn't been able to do so of late. I think if you bring in a Luis Arias, that is exactly what this team needs to fit on the infield for defense, and then you're able to get that consistent bat in the lineup as well. Now, if you bring him in, I don't know if that means Bryson Stott's on his way out, or if you find a way to move him over to third base. He's also played some first base, but we know Bryce Harper will not move from that position, but that's somebody I'd really like to keep an eye on is Luis Arias. Again, none of these players have any real ties right now to the Phillies or any real conversation going on about it. But when you look at some of these free agents and the way that the Phillies haven't really taken a jump or adding anybody that really, of star power at least, that can make any difference for this lineup, these are some guys, especially in the rotation as well, that can make that difference, that can be that late, maybe even early spring training addition, see what they have and work them into this lineup somehow, because this team, the way it is structured right now, to me has given me no hope, no juice, no energy to go into this Philly season. You bring in a Luis Arias or Eugenio Suarez, it gives me something to look forward to, some kind of hope that this team is going to be different than it was in the past few years. So if it's up to me, I'm bringing in Eugenio Suarez or Luis Arias, and then I'm bringing in Framber Valdez. You bring in Valdez in one of those bats, this lineup is going to be set. That rotation is going to feel a lot more comfortable, and then you don't necessarily have to rely on this bullpen all too often, because a lot of this rotation is going to be able to give you 6 to 7 innings per game. And I think that's the best thing for this team right now is to add that extra rotation help. Then you don't even have all this pressure on Andrew Painter. And then you bring in one of these bats. Again, I'm still not even against Marcell Ozuna to get some power in here. But again, I don't know if he's going to want to come here. And the fact that he's going to be taking up an outfield spot. But I do like the idea that somebody can come in here and play that late inning defense to take him out when the bat is no longer needed. So those are the biggest players in free agency that I think the Phillies can still obtain. We do have to look at this Mets team, though, because as much as I want to say the Phillies have done nothing, the Mets have done everything. They've given their fans every bit of positivity and a positive outlook to go into this next season. And it's just the opposite of what the Phillies have done for these Phillies fans, including myself. So what have the Mets done? What is their juice going into the season? Well, they did lose Pete Alonso. He goes over to the Orioles. They lose Brandon Nimmo. They lose a few pieces here that obviously were key pieces to this team. So that's not to go unnoticed. They also lose Diaz over there in their bullpen. But they do bring in Marcus Semien, Devin Williams, Jorge Polanco, Luke Weaver, Bo Bichette, Luis Robert Jr., and Freddie Peralta. That in and of itself was an all-star team a few years ago. Now, again, some of these players not having the same seasons, of course. Luis Robert Jr., he's been just on the trade block every trade deadline for the past 3 or 4 years, I'd say. But they finally bring him in. That's somebody the Phillies were interested in. Bo Bichette, we all know the story with that and how the Phillies were interested in that. Freddie Peralta, if he was able to be traded for so little, I would have given up Andrew Painter in a heartbeat to bring in Freddie Peralta. Phillies obviously are very conservative on what they do there with their farm league. They're not really willing to give up all too much. They have their guys that they want, Miller, Crawford, and Painter, so they don't want to trade them out, and that's really what it's going to take to get some of these bigger names in here. But the Mets have made the moves necessary to compete. The Dodgers, they bring in Kyle Tucker after winning back-to-back World Series. They're continuing to get better, and that's where it comes back to my first point here with who the Phillies can still bring in to make a difference, because when you look around the league, there's teams still making the push to get better. You look at the Cubs, they bring in some help as well. You look at what other teams are doing, even on the American League side of things, and like the Boston Red Sox, they still have moves to be made. They bring in Ranger Suarez. They know they're just a few pieces away. The Yankees, they go back and bring in Cody Bellinger, and they're still looking to make some moves. The Phillies just haven't done the next thing yet, in my opinion, and there's a lot of conversation around this still, that there has to be one more move, that Dave Dombrowski has to still do one more thing, and I'm under that belief that there's still got to be one more move made, whether that be even a lower-end starting rotation pitcher, just something to give fans a different perspective as to what the team's going to be, because if you're going to tell me that this is going to be the same team running back the same exact things, you bring back the same players, I can't have hope that anything is going to be different. Meanwhile, the Mets are going to sit there and they're going to bring in Juan Soto last year on a big contract, and then they go and bring in some of the biggest names in free agency. They trade for some of the biggest names. That, if I'm a Mets fan, is giving me a lot more hope that they have a better chance to compete this year than the Phillies or even than the Braves, because they haven't done much either. So we'll see what happens with all of this. That's everything going on in baseball right now. Of course, when spring training starts hitting and everything, I'll be breaking down each division as I did last year, getting into everything that could be going on here with the Phillies, of course, as I broke down every one of those games last year as well. So really excited, but just looking for the Phillies to give me that reason of hope, that I don't just have to look to Red October and hope that we're there and hope that they can get further, but that I can enjoy the season knowing that there's something to look forward to every single night when the Phillies come on. But when we come back, I'll be getting into everything NFL, so stay tuned here on 95.3 WCHE. Back to Locker Room Buzz. I'm your host, CJ Tully, and lots to get to here in the NFL. Starting off with the Pro Bowl. Now, I mentioned before the program that we're going to have a lot to talk about with this, given the fact that it's coming up this weekend, and that it's just not the same product that we were getting for years. It's no big hits. I mean, you know, the whole Sean Taylor thing. You saw everything that happened with what the Pro Bowl used to be, an actual football game. Yes, there was not tackling. There was not much tackling, so I can't say it was the most legit football game you would have seen all season long, but it was at least football. Now we moved over to flag football, and the games just seem less. It seems like it holds less to become a Pro Bowler anymore. I mean, you look at some of the names that are getting Pro Bowl bids. Right now we have Shadur Sanders. What did he really do to become a Pro Bowler by this point in the season? So I feel like to be a Pro Bowler, to hold any kind of weight, the Hall of Fame or any of that, it just doesn't hold the same weight as it once did. But the Pro Bowl flag football game will be held on Tuesday night at 8 p.m. if you're checking that out. The flag football game began in 2023 as they decided to change over from what it was with being the actual football game down in Hawaii and all of that. They now moved to this. But there's really no true competition or any juice going into this game. You can't really look forward to it as being anything but a scrimmage, and a scrimmage is even kind of pulling at teeth to try and get that out. You look at some of the other things that other sports have done with their All-Star games to kind of improve what the product is on the field or on the court. Now, the NBA, obviously, I don't talk much NBA. I'm not a huge fan of what they do with anything in the NBA, especially with all of the sitting players and the product that is on the court. But their All-Star game, they've kind of tweaked a little bit. They've changed up a few things. There's no real defense played in that, though, so they kind of give them more of an incentive. But again, you shouldn't need an incentive to be an all-star and play in a game that's supposed to reward you for being such a great player all season long. Now, I like what the MLB does. It's an actual traditional baseball game. Obviously, you're not throwing every pitch in the arsenal, and you're not necessarily swinging out of your boots, but there's some more normal things when you watch an MLB baseball or an all-star game. Yes, they're rotating the players more and more, so that's one thing you could take away from it, but there is more of an incentive in those. I do believe that it should go back to the home field advantage going to the team that wins. I think that's something that gives more juice to a lot of this. Now, in the NFL, you can't necessarily do that because they're played at a mutual site, but that's something to keep in note as well, as maybe you can do that to change things. Maybe don't do them at neutral sites, and winner of the Pro Bowl would get the home field advantage. It's so hard to implement all these things because so many teams are already out of it that why would they care? So that's something to look at there. The NHL has done the best with this, though. They went from a 3v3 tournament, which I already thought was fun, to have that little round robin there between the different metropolitan and all the different conferences. So NHL was doing it right, and they got even better by doing the 4 face-off here, where they have the 4 countries go at it. And last year was the most exciting I've ever seen a mid-season tournament. I mean, you had the U.S., the Canada game, and they were throwing punches. Yes, there were injuries in this, which is where I think I'll be curious to see what happens this year, as if they kind of take a step back in all of that to say, hey, like Matthew Tkachuk missed the majority of the season getting hurt in there. Charlie McAvoy, he got hurt in there as well. But they actually go out and they fight for something. They play for something. So if it takes representing your country, then every team, every league should be doing this, because you see what even all the hype is going into the World Baseball Classic. It's you put the stars and stripes on your chest, and it changes everything. It gives you more incentive. You're playing for your country and not just playing for a bonus or playing for fun and games. You're now playing for a purpose. So if the NHL is going to if any league is going to take anything away from the NHL, it's maybe you got to slap the flag on your chest, and maybe that's the way you get some more people involved. That would be the only fix that I can really come up with, because it's worked so well for the NHL, and we're going to see what happens again this year. But even the players wanting to participate, I mean, again, if you're wanting to play there for your country, you're going to have more participation from the league because they're wanting to play for something. Right now, there's no incentive, there's no drive, there's no reason for any of these leagues to really be doing anything. So maybe that's a way that the NBA, MLB, and now the Pro Bowl with the NFL can start to go about and make some change here for some of these players. But we did have a big championship weekend this past weekend. I want to recap all of those games, starting off with the AFC. We had the Patriots and the Broncos. Patriots win this one 10-7. Drake May had himself a questionable day, and I want to get into this in a bit with the debate I have against Drake May and some of the backlash that Jalen Hurts has caught over the past few years. But breaking down this game, Drake May, 10 for 21, 86 yards. He did rush for 65 yards with a touchdown as well. Ramondre Stevenson, he had 25 carries for 71 yards. Something that's missing with this Patriots team is Trevion Henderson. He finished out the season phenomenally. He was able to get things going early, especially late in that season. I mean, he was able to start getting 100-yard games. He was getting high 80-yard games. And then we haven't really seen him in the playoffs. He had 27 yards against the Chargers, 25 yards against the Texans, and then he had 5 yards just against the Broncos on just 3 carries. So we're not really seeing Trevion Henderson get going. I think if they want to win the Super Bowl, they're going to need his ability out of the backfield to get going as well. Ramondre Stevenson, yes, he's a great back out of the backfield, but he's not giving you the same production that you would get out of a Trevion Henderson if used properly, and I think the end of the season proves that perfectly. Now, on the wide receiver end of things, Mac Hollins, he was 2 receptions for 51 yards. Stephon Diggs, 5 receptions for 17 yards. As I said before, Drake May didn't really have to pass the ball much in this one. The defense set them up well for their touchdown there. Now, I do want to get into Drake May here with his stats in comparison to what we saw with Jalen Hurts. Before I get into the Broncos here, Drake May just 86 yards. Yes, they won the football game, and that's the storyline going in, is that they won the football game. But Jalen Hurts, he's a winner of football games as well. And every time he does win these games, let's look at the stats. Let's say, hey, maybe he wasn't able to do this, or can you imagine if he had this and that with him? But Drake May puts up these numbers. He gets to the Super Bowl, and there's not really that conversation. Now, I posted a video about this yesterday. Some people wanted to tell me that conversation's out there. I've yet to see it. It seems more so like they're just happy that he's a young quarterback getting to the Super Bowl. But every time Jalen Hurts has I wouldn't even say lackluster, but not the greatest stats in a game, it always comes back to, oh, well, can you imagine if he was a better player, or if anybody else had these weapons that he has? But winning football is winning football, and that's why I'm not putting down Drake May. But when you compare it to somebody like Jalen Hurts, I think that him just winning football games is enough as well. I don't think you always need the flashy stats. Sometimes it is just winning a football game. They've also proven that they can beat some great defenses. Drake May and this Patriots offense, they've beaten the Chargers, Texans, Broncos, and the Baltimore Ravens this season. Those are all great defenses, so that's a notch on their belt as well, being able to beat those defenses with Drake May. So we'll keep an eye on what Drake May is able to do in the Super Bowl, and especially what he's able to do next season, because after a season like he's having, a possible MVP season, it is always interesting to see what they do the next season. Can he keep it up? Did he just have a great spark plug season because of the weak schedule? Yes, they did have an easier schedule, so we'll see what happens with Drake May going forward. Getting back to this game, though, and the Broncos, Jarrett Stidham, he had himself a solid day. I don't think he necessarily lost them this game. 17 for 31, 133 yards. He had a touchdown and an interception this one. R.J. Harvey wasn't able to get it going on the ground, though. 13 carries for 37 yards. In a very snowy day where the weather's getting bad in the second half, you're going to need to rely on your running back. They weren't able to do so with Harvey. Marvin Mims Jr., he had 4 receptions for 62 yards. And then Cortland Sutton had their lone touchdown with 17 yards in this one. The biggest game-changing play in all of this, well, I guess there were two. One was Sean Payton going for it on fourth down early in that game. They were right there. They could just kick the field goal, gone up 10-0. They decided not to, and that then cost them in the long run. I don't know why they thought this game was going to be a shootout where they needed more points. It was going to be a low-scoring affair. This was two great defenses. Take the points when you need them, and this game would have been a completely different game going into that second half. There was also the Jarrett Stidham fumble that was ruled an incompletion, and then it was ruled intentional grounding, and then they go back and they ruled a fumble. I personally don't believe that was a backward pass whatsoever. If anything, it was sideways, but I didn't see it being backwards in any case. So that set the Patriots up with great field position, and they ended up scoring on that drive. So those were the two costly moments, and besides from that, it was kind of just a back-and-forth defensive affair. We didn't see too much else going on, which is where if the Broncos would have just taken that field goal, this game would have been completely different, and we could have seen a real momentum switch early on in this game. Now, another game we have to look at here was the Rams-Seahawks, and now this game was a complete shootout, which was completely expected. I said last week on the show how the NFC just seems so much more hungry. These games just seem like they have so much more to them than they do on the AFC side of things, and this game proved all of that. This was the trilogy game between the Rams and the Seahawks. Seahawks win 31-27. Matthew Stafford, did we see Matthew Stafford play his last game for the Rams? He goes 22 for 35, 374 yards, and 3 touchdowns. He is, of course, up for MVP as well. We'll see what the conversation comes down to now that neither him nor, or actually now Drake May made the playoff or the Super Bowl and Matthew Stafford did not. I don't know if that'll play into anything. Blake Corum goes 9 carries for 55 yards. Puka Nacua had himself a very nice day again, 167 yards with a touchdown. Devontae Adams had a touchdown as well. But like I said, is Matthew Stafford done in the NFL? There's been a lot of conversation between his injuries and his age. Now he is playing at his prime. Again, he's up for MVP, but is it time for him to call it quits? Do they bring somebody else in on this younger team that they have working now with the Rams with the Puka Nacua? You have Blake Corum. Kyron Williams still isn't too old there. And then you also have Devontae Adams who you're working with. He's obviously an older player, but maybe you bring in a younger quarterback. You start to revamp this whole thing. Even if it is bringing somebody under Matthew Stafford for one more year, we'll see what the conversation is with that. Sam Darnold now for the Seahawks. He goes 25 for 36, 346 yards with 3 touchdowns. Kenneth Walker, 19 carries for 62 yards and a touchdown. He has been a difference maker in the playoffs. They weren't really giving him all the end zone touches or the red zone touches during the regular season. They go back, they fix that, and now he has been an absolute monster for them in the postseason. Jackson Smith and Jigba, 10 carries for 153 yards. Rashid Shaheed, 1 reception for 51 yards. Yes, it's just 1 reception. He doesn't usually get more than 3 or 4 a game, but when he does get them, he makes them count. He makes his time count as a punt returner. And for all of these reasons, I believe he is the best addition that any team added at the trade deadline. I said on my show after the trade deadline that I believe this was going to be one of the best because I was very high on the Seahawks. And it's just having that guy that you can go to. Now that you have a Jackson Smith and Jigba, Rashid Shaheed, and Cooper Kupp, one of those guys is going to be open on every play, and one of those guys is going to be open in the slot. So there's always something to look for here for Sam Darnold, and that's a huge addition there by the Seahawks team. Jake Bobo, he had 17 yards and a touchdown as well. It was really one of his first receptions of the season. So this team is just complete all around. This is why I've been high on the Seahawks team for so long. Coming into the season, they were the least likely to even win their division behind the Cardinals. And that's kind of what rose my eyebrow to take the Seahawks to make the playoffs. I had them in there as the 2 seed because I just didn't understand how they could be so overlooked with the team that they have. I didn't even expect this defense to be as dominant as they are. And this is going to be a tough task for Drake May and this Patriots offense coming in here. I said how they've been competitive with a lot of these great teams. and great defenses, but we'll see how they fare with the Seahawks team. I do think it's going to be an interesting game. I'll break down my thoughts going into the Super Bowl next week, of course. But when we come back from this break, I still want to break down some of the storylines we're going to have going into the Super Bowl. You look at some of these coaches, these players, they have great stories, and it's going to be rewarding to see them win the Super Bowl if possible. Also want to go back into my debate here with the NFL quarterbacks seemingly get a pass, but there's others that don't. So when I get back from this quick break, we'll get into all of that. So stay tuned here on 95.3 WCHE. Welcome back to Locker Room Buzz. I'm your host, TJ Tully, and we have some great storylines headed into the Super Bowl. Starting off here with Sam Darnold, drafted in 2018 by the Jets. He was with the Jets till 2020. We saw him kind of become a every team player at this point. He goes to the Panthers 2021 to 2022. He's then with the 49ers through 2023. In 2024, we saw his career resurgence last year with the Vikings. He goes for a career high 4,300 yards with 35 touchdowns, and then the Vikings let him walk. And this was where I was confused because did they just not expect him to have this great year again? Did they not expect him to even be half of what he was that year before? We now see what they're doing with J.J. McCarthy, and there's just a lot of question marks with what the Vikings did there to let him go. They let Kirk Cousins walk. Maybe they just don't see true talent. So then he comes in here with the Seahawks, and like I said before the break, Seahawks were not likely to win this division. They were one of the teams low ranked there in the NFC in general. And then he comes out here this season with 4,000 yards and 25 touchdowns, and now he's sitting in the Super Bowl. So a great comeback story for Sam Darnold. We've seen this with a lot of players. The biggest example you can look at is Baker Mayfield, somebody who's kind of bounced around and find their place, or started to find his place. You look at somebody like a Mac Jones. He's starting to find his way, or he was finding his way with the 49ers before they seemingly went back to Brock Purdy. So seems like there might just be players that fit better with other organizations. They might get drafted high. And that's something that also goes back to like the Fernando Mendoza thing, where he's now going to be drafted by the Raiders, but they're not putting him in a great position. So would you rather just go to a better team where you're sitting on the bench for a little bit, find your way, and then maybe you get pushed as the starter, rather than go to one of these bad teams? Like you look at Sam Darnold, you went to the Jets, Baker Mayfield went to the Browns. There's really nothing around you to work with. Like you can even look at Cam Ward right now with the Titans. Now they're going to bring in Brian Dable and Robert Saleh. Maybe they can fix something on that offense, but Cam Ward is a great talent. His whole college career with Miami, he had to come back in games because he had no defense. Right now, he has no defense and no receivers to even be throwing to. So Cam Ward's rookie year looked like an absolute mess because there's nothing there for him. So some of these players that get drafted so highly go to some of these very lackluster teams, and they just can't make a name for themselves. And it's a shame, but that's just the way the NFL works, because obviously the worst team is going to get one of the higher draft picks. So it's just something to keep an eye on when you go further here with some of these quarterbacks, especially with the Fernando Mendoza, who, I mean, he's going to have some weapons, I would say, there with him in Vegas, but some of these guys who get drafted high just need to find their way on a better team with a better coordinator, better coaching. And that was the example here with Sam Darnold, was he went to the Vikings, turned things around, and now look at what he's doing here with the Seahawks. So congratulations to Sam Darnold. Now on the coaching end of things, another great story here. Mike Vrabel, he played his time there with the Patriots as a player. He then coached with the Titans from 2018 to 2023. He was 54-45 in the regular season with them. He had a few postseason games as well, but nothing that really jumps off the page for you. He then signs a one-year contract with the Browns as a coaching and personnel consultant. Now, again, one-year contract, didn't really have a huge role. The Browns then worked him out of that organization as well. This season, he was then hired by the Patriots in 2025 and now is already entering the Super Bowl. He is somebody who went in there, turned that program and that organization around. And again, it seemingly just looks like you need that fit. Mike Vrabel knows the Patriots organization. He's working with Mike McDaniels. It just seems like some of these guys just need to find the right home, and everything can turn around. So there's such great storylines here with Sam Darnold, with Mike Vrabel, that you can look at. You can even look at somebody like a Stephon Diggs, who there were people kind of putting him down after last year with the Texans. He now signs with the Patriots. He's back to having over 1,000 yards receiving. And there's just some of these guys that find their place, and that's just something to keep an eye on here, like I said, with some of these younger players that maybe it's not working out in the first place, but maybe it all takes is a new home, a new environment, a change of scenery, which I know a lot of people, including myself, need in life sometimes. Is just that change of scenery to turn things around, and these guys have found that with themselves. So what quarterbacks do I think get a pass? I mentioned this before. I kind of teased it. Some quarterbacks in the NFL just get a pass for not playing all that great, while there's other quarterbacks that win football games but don't have the flashy numbers, and they get more of a bad rep about it. Starting off with the quarterbacks that I believe get a pass. Josh Allen, he is number one in this entire debate. Didn't believe he deserved the MVP last year. I thought that should have gone to Lamar Jackson. This season, he makes the playoffs, and even in their loss, where he turns the ball over 4 times, nobody's really saying, oh, Josh Allen is unable to get them over the hump, or Josh Allen really cost them in this one. It's going back to the refs and the final plays of that game, but nobody's talking about how they got to that point and why that game was the way it was against the Broncos. It was Josh Allen played a horrible game of football. And yes, you feel for the guy in the post-game press conference, but he's owning up to it because it was his fault. And yes, this season, Josh Allen did not play great football. He had 3,600 yards, 25 touchdowns, and 10 interceptions. Like I said, he lost in that game against the Broncos as well. Not a horrible season, but I'd said week in and week out that James Cook was kind of carrying this offense. You weren't having to see Josh Allen be Superman necessarily because he could hand it off and that line was working very well. Now, to that same question and that same debate, you look at somebody like the wide receivers around him, and nobody wants to say that that's an issue, or they say that Josh Allen's just Superman, he doesn't need anybody, and the organization hasn't brought anybody in to even help him. But then how are you going to fault teams for having that around them and they win more football games? Sometimes the player just needs players around him. You can't have Superman every single year. You don't see these Superman teams going to the Super Bowls. You see the Chiefs, they had their reign. Yes, Patrick Mahomes was obviously the best player on that team, but he had some talent on the wide receiving end. He had Pacheco, he had Kareem Hunt, he had Tyreek Hill in a lot of those. There was talent around him. You can't just be Josh Allen, be Superman, and head to the Super Bowl and think that that's how it's going to work. Lamar Jackson has had every weapon around him, and he still is unable to get there because it does take a lot to get to a Super Bowl and to win enough games in the regular season. Somebody else I think gets a pass is Justin Herbert. He has been in the league for a while now. This season he had 3,700 yards, 26 touchdowns, and 13 interceptions, but he's yet to win a playoff game. He's made a few playoffs. I believe he's made 3 playoffs or 4 playoffs now. He's yet to win a playoff game, and yet nobody is saying that he's an issue or that he should be run out of Vegas or of LA. It's, oh, well, they'll figure it out. Now they bring in Harbaugh, and now they'll figure it out. They're bringing in Mike McDaniels. They're trying to find pieces to work with Justin Herbert, but they're not saying that Justin Herbert is the problem. And this goes to my first point here of a player that gets all of the slack. It's Jalen Hurts. Now everybody wants to say they're not bringing in the right pieces. They're not going to be able to bring in the right OC because Jalen Hurts isn't able to do this or that. Jalen Hurts has been to 2 Super Bowls. He's played in 10 playoff games. He's won 10 playoff games in 5 years, and he's won a Super Bowl and a Super Bowl MVP. Jalen Hurts, yes, might not always put the flashiest numbers. Yes, I do believe there are issues with Jalen Hurts that are kind of hindering what this team is able to do, but he's a winning football player. He has more to his name than any of these players I've named before with Josh Allen, Justin Herbert, or even Lamar Jackson, who I think gets a lot of slack as well because he is unable to make a deep playoff run. So just in football in general, I feel like there should be the same standard held. I think winning should be number one priority. Yes, you're going to want stats. You're going to want to feed the players around you. But if you're playing winning football, how do you catch more hate than some of these players that might have the better name? They might put up the flashier numbers so they're easier to talk about, but they're not getting to that same destination as the guy who just plays enough football to win football games. You look at a lot of the players who go out above and beyond, they aren't winners in any aspect of football. I mean, you have the NFL and even in college football, some of the flashiest names aren't the ones winning the big football games. Fernando Mendoza had to go into a second gear to win the national championship. He had to go and use his legs, but I mean, he's usually just a pocket passer who gets the ball out to his players. That's the way he wins football games. Sometimes players just have their way about things, and yes, it might be hard to mold them into something else, especially with the Jalen Hurts, who has had a new offensive coordinator every year pretty much since college. But again, he's winning football games, so there always has to be this give and take. I have nothing against Josh Allen or Justin Herbert, but they kind of get a free pass to this, and now they fire Sean McDermott from the Bills as if he was the issue. But again, they have no weapons on the outside, and Josh Allen wasn't playing well enough this year to get them to that point. So there's just this constant conversation. I mean, if you want to keep going with it, Dak Prescott, I mean, I think he has played great football over his years. He's just unable to get over that hump, and he has the pieces around him. That I'm really not sure how the Cowboys haven't gotten over that hump, besides the fact that they are the Cowboys and they just choke football games. But they've gotten to the point where Dak Prescott, people question him, but he's never the issue. I think he puts up enough numbers and great enough numbers that you can't even blame Dak Prescott for the way that he plays. So that was my quick rant here on this NFL quarterback getting a pass, because I've seen a lot about it. I posted a video about it, and I think it's just a conversation that needs to be had when you look at what some of these players are doing in these football games. So we'll go now to the coaching carousel. I've said there was a lot that was going on. The Buccaneers hired Zach Robinson as an offensive coordinator to replace the fired Josh Gizzard. He was Zach Robinson coached 2 seasons with the Falcons. He was the pass game coordinator and quarterback coach for the Rams, where Baker Mayfield played 4 games in 2022. He is their 5th offensive coordinator in 5 years with Baker, so we'll see what happens with that. Tampa Bay's offense went from 3rd to 21st last past season, so they obviously needed a change there, and bringing in Zach Robinson, they're hoping is what the big change will be. The Falcons' offense, though, they went from 6th in yards to 14th in yards and 13th in points to 24th in points. So he's kind of coming in here on a bad rep. The team has kind of fallen all over there with the Falcons. Now, a lot of this comes down to Michael Penix and the way that he had been playing, so we'll see what happens with that. But the Buccaneers bring in Zach Robinson. The Ravens, they bring in Jesse Minter as their new head coach. He was the Chargers defensive coordinator. He spent 2 years with the Chargers, and he was 2 years with Michigan as a defensive coordinator while Jim Harbaugh was there. So it'll be interesting now for him to work with his brother. The Chargers were 5th in the league in total defense this past season, or not work with his brother, but replace his brother on total defense this past season. He was also part of the Michigan team that won the national championship, and that team was a very defense-heavy team. You had a very run-heavy team as well with Blake Corum. J.J. McCarthy wasn't really a difference maker for that team, so we'll see what he's able to do here with this Ravens team. They were supposed to be crowded on their defense this year. It didn't necessarily work that way. They didn't have a great defense, and then the offense wasn't able to necessarily make up for everything that needed to be there with them. Now, a big hiring that I like, but apparently a lot of people with the Steelers organization or Steelers fan base aren't a fan of. Mike McCarthy gets hired by the Steelers. He's a Pittsburgh kid. He was with the Packers from 2006 to 2018. He was 125, 77, and 2 in his time there, and he went to 6 NFC North titles, and he won the Super Bowl there with the Packers, of course. He was also with the Cowboys 2020 to 2024. He was 49 and 35 with 3 consecutive 12-win seasons, and he won the NFC East twice. Now he joins the Steelers, but what will they do at quarterback? Does he run it back with Aaron Rodgers? Is that maybe a tie there of why they thought Mike McCarthy might be the great hire? We'll see what happens with that. I don't necessarily think staying with Aaron Rodgers is the answer. He played solid football this year, but when do you make that flip over? You have Will Howard. I don't know if he's necessarily going to be the next Big Ben with the way that he is structured, but I don't know what else you're going to do. Maybe you bring back a Russell Wilson. I really don't know what the Steelers would do other than that. Maybe they draft somebody late, but there really isn't a deep quarterback room or quarterback class this year. Maybe you wait till next year and you kind of chalk this season up as just a learning year for Mike McCarthy over there with the Steelers. But we'll see what happens with that. You also have Brian Daboll. He signs as the offensive coordinator with the Titans. Robert Saleh will be the new head coach there. Like I said before, I just don't know what this offense is going to be. There's not really much for Brian Daboll to work with. There's some rumors that they're going to be bringing in some new wide receiver talent this year in the draft, but they don't have too much to work with right now. And Cam Ward is kind of just stuck here in Alcatraz as to what is he going to be able to do with this team, even if they bring in a few receivers. This seems like a very long process they're going to have to work with. And then Robert Saleh, he came into a Jets team that was kind of structured the same way, and they did nothing, and he got run out of town there. So not sure what the future holds for this Titans team right now. The Browns, this is the news that just broke before I got on air. The Browns hired Todd Monken as their head coach. He was the former Ravens offensive coordinator, so we'll see what he can do there. It looks like Shadur Sanders might be the quarterback going forward. He gets the Pro Bowl bid. Still curious on that. Dylan Gabriel didn't play all too bad when he played as well. They're going to have to add some talent as well. Hopefully they can bring in a wide receiver. The running backs, Quinshon Judkins, I love him back there, so maybe they're set there. But again, lots of questions here with this Browns team. When will they ever be competing again? Is there anything for Todd Monken to really work with? Are they going to have to restructure? There's a lot of question marks with these lower-end teams, and seemingly that's going to be the Browns here in this aspect as well. But one more segment coming up. We have lots to talk about in college football. I'll give you guys my top 10 coming into the season. It's way too early, obviously. There's going to be moves made, but so far after the transfer portal, these are my top 10 I'll give you guys and my reasoning behind it. And also the college football playoffs will remain at a 12-team format but with some different rules. So I'll break down all of that on the other side of this timeout. So stay tuned here on 95.3 WCHE. Welcome back to Locker Room Buzz. I'm CJ Tully, and like I said, lots to talk about here in college football. I hope everybody's staying warm out there. It is absolutely freezing. And again, if you like what you're hearing, you can always check me out all week long on social media at Let's Talk Sports. That's Let's TAWK Sports. Check out my podcast. I have a website as well, all with the same name. I'm on Instagram and TikTok. Feel free to check out the weekly content. I post pretty much daily of graphics, videos, discussion points, everything. So feel free to check all of that out as well. And let's get into some college football talk as always. by talking about this new college football format. And yes, they've agreed to stay with a 12-team format. This comes as the Big Ten and the SEC were unable to agree on what they thought the playoff should be going forward. The SEC was pushing for a 16-team playoff, which would allow for more at-large bids. Meanwhile, the Big Ten was pushing for a 24-team playoff with multiple automatic qualifiers from each conference. This would obviously take away the conference title games and their meaning, and this would replace those title games with some more seeding games. Now, I'm very opposed to the 24-team playoff. I think that is way too many teams, and you're just going to have some bad talent that finds their way in there. I am a fan of getting rid of the conference championship games and what they hold and what they mean, because you look at how it didn't impact Alabama to get absolutely stomped in the SEC championship game this past year. I just think that when you look at those, it doesn't really hurt many teams, and it doesn't really help many teams either. I mean, you can look at a BYU-Texas Tech game. BYU would have gotten in, and Texas Tech, but BYU only lost to Texas Tech twice, and that was their only losses on the season. So how much does that really play into things? There's always that question there with that. So I would like to get rid of the conference title games, and I kind of like the fact that there's a seeding game. I know there was a lot of talk about maybe BYU playing Vanderbilt. Winner of that could have gotten in this past season. So that would add a little bit more excitement than the conference championship games technically do. Don't see them ever getting rid of those, though, obviously for TV ratings and things. But that part of the Big Ten's proposal was interesting to me. Now, with that, there are a few changes they will be making with the 12-team format. First off, Notre Dame is guaranteed a spot if they finish within the top 12. This is so far just for the 26-27 season. A lot of people are going to have an issue with this because Notre Dame doesn't play great talent. So if they're highly ranked and they don't lose a game, they're obviously going to finish within the top 12. I do believe UConn is also a team that's not necessarily part of a conference, and then there's conversation if they ever can become a part of that. I don't think that would ever happen, but Notre Dame, without being part of a conference, will now get an automatic spot if they finish in the top 12. As a Notre Dame fan, that is great, but I also can see where on the other side of things, it's people not having too high of a standing or appreciation for that. There's also going to be auto bids to earn to each Power 4 champion, regardless of their ranking. So the ACC, Big Ten, Big 12, and SEC, their conference champion will automatically be in. This had to be added because we did see 2 G5 teams make it because the ACC champion wasn't ranked highly enough. So now they get rid of where you have to be ranked to be able to get in. It's just going to be the champion of the ACC, Big 12, Big 10, and SEC automatically finding their way in. So those are the changes they're going to be making. Some things I would like to see change in the way I would structure the college football playoffs. Like I said, I like the 12-team format, but I do think there has to be changes. First off, the G5 teams, if they want to be included and if they want to make the college football playoffs as a conference champion or anything, they should have to prove that they belong during the regular season. They should have to schedule an SEC or a Big 10 or a Big 12 game, and if they win that or if they hold their ground in those, then they can be qualified. Because you look at a team like Tulane, and everyone knows my ties now with Tulane. They played Ole Miss earlier this season and got stomped. They then made the playoffs as the American champion, and they played Ole Miss again, and they got stomped again. That's no fun for anybody to watch. Yes, it's great for the school to get the recognition. It was cool for me to be able to interview the playoff coach and quarterback, but to sit there and say that that's a game that people want to watch and that's good for ratings, obviously that's not the case. The G5 should have to prove themselves during the regular season. If they play a team that's highly ranked or a team in one of these Power 4 conferences and they get stomped, they should automatically be pushed out of conference discussion or playoff discussion at that. I also believe that all games should be played at the higher seed stadium. Now, this happens in the first round where you have a team like last year when I went to the Penn State game and they hosted SMU because they were the higher ranked team. But then after the first round, it goes to neutral sites and they become bowl games. I don't like that whatsoever. I think all of these games should be held at the higher seed stadium. This kind of takes away some of the advantage of being a higher seed and getting that bye week because you don't get a home game. And with that, it takes away what college football is. The home field advantage, the student camaraderie, that's a lot of what college football is. That's what draws a lot of people in. And if you take that away with making these neutral sites, I think it just takes a lot away from what college football is. Finally, the preseason ranking should not hold much weight. Now, I'm going to give you guys my ranking, so obviously it's a little contradicting, but again, my power rankings hold no weight. That's just my opinion, and having an opinion is perfectly fine. But when these rankings come out, and then it takes so long for some of these high-ranked teams to fall out of the top 12, and then it takes some of these teams so long to get in. You look at Vanderbilt and BYU, it took them so long to even get in this conversation because of how far back they were ranked. I think these should start coming out in week 3, 4, or 5 maybe, where you have some established games to say, hey, this team is better than this team, rather than some guy just sitting down saying this is how it should be and this is how we're going to look at it the rest of the season. So that's how I would fix the playoffs and my personal way of how I would do it. Again, holds no weight, but give you guys my perspective there. I made a whole video on it at Let's Talk Sports on YouTube if you want to check out any deeper conversation I had on that. Now I'm going to give you guys my top 10 coming into the season. We'll start at number 10. I'm going to have Ohio State. Now, Ohio State was a team I was not very high on this past season, but they've made a few moves here where I think they can still finish within the top 10. They have Julian saying he's going to be in his second year. Their offensive weapons and defense may take a little bit of a hit. They're going to be losing Carnell Tate. He's going to be going to the draft, and they're going to lose a lot of that defense to the draft as well. They do bring in Arthur Smith as offensive coordinator. That's somebody to keep an eye on. And Jeremiah Smith, his growth will continue as well. They also bring in 5-star recruit Chris Henry Jr. as a wide receiver, so looking to restock there. So Ohio State at number 10. Number 9, I have LSU. They're bringing in Sam Leavitt. He had 1,600 yards, 10 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions this year for the Sun Devils. I like Sam Leavitt a lot. He was obviously my favorite pick coming out of the transfer portal. You bring in Lane Kiffin, and he can build you a winning culture. They're obviously bringing a lot of other transfers as well. Just knowing where LSU finished last year and how that fall-off happened with Garrett Nussmeier and everything, I can't put them too high right now. I need to see something. They need to prove something. But give me LSU to finish in the top 10 at number 9. Now I have the now coming off a national championship Indiana Hoosiers at number 8. I do believe this team is still going to be able to compete for a few years, but you can't say that losing the Heisman isn't going to hurt this team. Losing Fernando Mendoza is going to be a big hit to this team. They bring in Josh Hoover to replace him. He played over at TCU where he had 3,400 yards, 29 touchdowns, and 13 interceptions this past year. He is going to play well for them, don't get me wrong, but he's not going to be the Heisman like Mendoza was. So to replace that is going to be a lot. Kurt Signetti, I know he's going to rally the boys, but I just need to see something first before just committing to that. Charlie Becker, he'll get more of a time to shine now. He made himself a name in the playoffs. Him and Omar Cooper Jr., he's also going to be there to work with this team. Somebody I'm really excited to see is Nick Marsh. He's coming over from Michigan State. He was a big name last season, didn't necessarily have the stats to prove so, but I do think with a new ramping here of what you're going to see with this Indiana team, he's going to be a big piece of all of that. Now, this team, actually, after I looked over it a little bit, I might want to move a little bit higher, but I do think Miami is going to slot in here at number 7. They're going to be bringing back Malachi Toney. They're going to be bringing back Mark Fletcher Jr. at wide receiver and running back, and I like that a lot for them. Now, news came out last night that they're finally getting their transfer quarterback. That's going to be Darian Menza. He's coming over from Duke. I had 3,900 yards, 34 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions for the Blue Devils last year, and this guy is going to be a dog for them. There was all the legal issues because he committed to Duke, then he wanted to leave and transfer to Miami, but they ended up figuring all that out, and now Menza will be joining Miami. They also bring in a 4-star prospect and 10th nationally ranked wide receiver in Joshua Moore. Excited to see what he can do. Also coming out last night, after Menza agrees to come over here to Miami, he'll be bringing his wide receiver 1, Cooper Barkate. He's going to be joining them here in Miami with 1,100 yards and 7 touchdowns for Duke. They're also going to need to revamp this defense. That's why I couldn't put them too high, was they're going to be losing a lot of guys in the draft there from Miami, but Miami at number 7. Now number 6, Texas Tech. They're going to be winning the Big 12. That is a guarantee. I don't see anybody really competing with them. They still have a great winning culture. They obviously got smacked by Oregon this year, but I think they're going to revamp, they're going to regroup, and they're going to fix this offense. Brandon Sorsby comes in there from Cincinnati. He transfers within the Big 12. He's going to be a big difference maker for them. They still have a great defense as well. Wide receiver-wise, they bring in Malcolm Simmons. He's over from Auburn, and then they bring in Kenny Johnson, a transfer from Pitt. So some big moves there on offense where I think they're still going to be able to compete. They're going to be losing one of their Heisman finalists, or almost finalists, he was the 5th, Jacob Rodriguez, so we'll see what the replacement for him would be. At number 5, I have Texas A&M. I was very high on them this past year, and they're only going to get better. They obviously had to play with the wind at the home field, and I think they're just going to be able to get over that this year. And they're going to be able to be a better team. I know a lot of people didn't take them too seriously last year, and their exit in the playoffs didn't really help their case whatsoever. They still have a lot of young talent on offense. They're going to have Concepcion and Mario Craver. They also add Isaiah Horton from Alabama. He had 511 yards and 8 touchdowns. I really am excited to see what he does. With Marcel Reed returning as well at quarterback. They also bring in freshman Devin Fitzgerald, who is Larry Fitzgerald's son. So if the big name does anything for you there. I just think this offense is going to continue to roll. They're not done yet. I love their head coach, and I think this team is going to continue to roll. Now, a team that might be controversial, I guess, to put this high because they didn't do all too much last year. Give me Texas. Arch Manning in his sophomore year, I think they're going to be able to revamp that. They did lose some key pieces in the portal, though. They lose Contrevion Windsor at running back, and they lose Parker Livingston at wide receiver. But they're going to be able to revamp, and I just think that you can only sleep on Arch Manning for so long until he finally becomes what he's supposed to be. So give me them at number 4. Again, this is where I might want to switch Miami and Texas because I do have more hope in Miami, but I'm going to stick with Texas for right now. Number 3, give me Notre Dame. Again, they're going to be highly ranked coming into this. They don't have a difficult schedule, and their team isn't all that bad. They have C.J. Carr coming into his second year. They are losing Jadarian Price and Jeremiah Love there to the draft, so that's going to be a big hit for them as that was a lot of their offense. They're still going to have Jaden Greenhouse and Jordan Faison. They add Quincy Porter from Ohio State. He was a former 5-star. And they add Malian Graham from Ohio State as well. So some high-profile talent there coming out of a great program in Ohio State. This offense should be able to get going. What can they do on defense? We'll see. And Marcus Freeman seemed very adamant to stay with this Notre Dame team, which gives me hope that he does think they're going to be something, that he didn't want to leave for the NFL or take another college football coaching job. So give me Notre Dame at 3. Number 2, give me Georgia. Not too much to say other than they're Georgia. Gunnar Stockton's going to be continuing in his 3rd year now. And, I mean, you just can't count these Bulldogs out. I think Kirby Smart has coached them phenomenally. They had a real shot there in that game against Ole Miss, and I'm going to be really excited to see what Georgia can do this upcoming year. Finally, number 1, give me Oregon. They're bringing back pretty much the entire team. Dante Moore decides to stay and not go to the draft. He's going to be in there at quarterback. They're going to have the backup of Dylan Raiola. If he ever gets some playing time, that's a great backup to have. The Corian Moore, Evan Stewart, and Jeremy McLean at wide receiver will be returning. And then you have your returning running backs and Jordan Davidson and Daryl Hill Jr. I mean, Dan Lanning, they're getting closer every single year. You can't count out Oregon. I think this team is eventually going to win a national championship with Dan Lanning. And I believe it's going to be this upcoming year. Oregon is my number 1 team. I do want to quick mention my team just outside of this top 10 is Penn State. I'm not a huge Penn State guy, but you look at their schedule, it's not all that difficult. They bring in Matt Campbell. He brings in Rocco Beck at quarterback. He's going to be big for them with 2,500 yards this past year. And then Benjamin Brahmer at tight end. He had 446 yards with 6 touchdowns this year. So they're going to be able to get things going with Penn State. Again, not with a difficult schedule. So wouldn't be surprised if they make their way into that top 10. But that will do it here for Locker Room Buzz. Again, I'm CJ Tully. You can check me out weekly here on 95.3 WCHE talking sports. Always giving you guys the latest. You can always call in at 610-701-9243. And check me out during the week on social media at Let's Talk Sports. That's Let's, T-A-W-K Sports. You can check out my website at letstalksports.com. And again, find me on YouTube, Spotify, Instagram, and TikTok. I'm everywhere for the local and national sports news. So thank you guys again, and I'll check you out next week here on Locker Room Buzz.